Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. It's me, Niall, delighted as always to be joined by Owen, and we're here reacting to news that kind of has come to light over the past kind of day or so. That Harlem Eubank has been touted as a potential first defense for Lewis Crocker's IBF welterweight title. Of course, newly won welterweight title only a couple of weeks ago now. Only he beat Paddy Donovan. Controversial decision, you could say. But yeah, there's been talk of, who might be next. Will it be a trilogy? Will it be a mandatory? Harlem Eubank isn't a name that kind of sprung to most people's minds when kind of having those discussions. But a source has told Ring Magazine apparently that Harlem Eubank could be under serious consideration for this fight for a first offence. Just give us your reaction to that. What's your thoughts on a potential Harlem Eubank Lewis Crocker fight?
Um, it definitely wouldn't have been one that I would have said would be next. It's not a fight that does anything for me. To be honest with yourself, there's a lot, and I mean a hell of a lot better fights than this. Leon Paro has just won the mandatory in a sense for the bout to become number one. You'd expect that, but knowing the IVF, it's one of the harsher, one of the dodgier sort of organisations in terms of we've seen it before with um, when they're stripping champions when there's no need. So it doesn't surprise me if he gets a bit of a mental mandatory before going into bigger names. The likes of Joe Cordina spring to mind of when he had a broken hand, and they stripped him. Mental, no need. When you see champions that hold weight classes hostage, we've seen the likes of middleweight, almost some of the bouts there held hostage for a long, long time. So Harlem Eubank is a decent fighter. Um, he's nowhere near a world level fighter. He may say that he is. His family may say that he is. He's not a world level fighter. I underestimated him in his last fight. I will be honest. I was probably a bit harsher than I needed to be, but European level fighter, yes. World level, absolutely not. So for me, I think it's a cherry picked defense. So before Lewis Crocker has to step in with other champions or world ranked contenders, he can at least say he's defended his belt.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of disagree. First of all, on the IBF point, absolutely. I think that's why it's been so interesting. People saying, what will Lewis Crocker do next, or what will the IBF kind of mandate him to do next? We've seen countless occasions in the past, as you say, underwhelming mandatory challengers. But yeah, the Harlem Eubank fight, I wouldn't be a huge fan of Harlem Eubank myself. The last fight he had against Jack Catterall didn't endear me to him anymore. I think, as you said, I don't know, was it being too harsh? That was just a bad clash of styles. In that one with Jack Catterall, terrible fight. But yeah, not a name a lot of people mention, but I have to agree with you in saying that I don't think Harlem Eubank is a world level fighter. I really don't. Just on that kind of, you said, you know, Harlem Eubank isn't a world level fighter, which I agree with. But, would it be a comfortable night's work for Lewis Crocker? Because a lot of people think Lewis Crocker, you know, people are saying he shouldn't have that world title, maybe. Is he levels above Harlem Eubank in your opinion?
He's not levels above Harlem Eubank, in my opinion. As I've said, I don't think Lewis Crocker was a world champion, but here we are. Again, I do think he lost the fight, two knockdowns, but other than the two knockdowns, I think I gave Paddy Donovan pretty much every single round. Um, so it's that. However, although I don't feel his levels above Harlem Eubank, he has got what Harlem Eubank hasn't, and it's not necessarily a get out of jail free card, but it is power. He's got a lot more power than Harlem Eubank, and I think Harlem Eubank can be caught. Lewis Crocker can be caught. So I think the styles would make for a better fight than obviously in Jack Catterall Eubank. And like you say, I don't know if I was just being too harsh on Eubank. Was it just the styles were never going to clash, or Catterall was just levels above him, and he made it dirty. Unless they rematch, who's to know? I just think Lewis Crocker's got too much power for Harlem Eubank. There's probably not too much dissimilarities in boxing ability and styles when it comes to boxing, because Lewis Crocker, fair play to him, it was a different game plan to what I expected. He just sat patiently and waited against Paddy Donovan. I think he knew if he got into a firefight with Donovan again, he definitely wouldn't be walking away with the world title. But those two knockdowns, although I felt that the first was a bit harsh to the back of the head, it counted. And especially if that second one lands clean on Harlem Eubank like that, I think Harlem Eubank goes. Paddy Donovan was clever enough to survive. I know it was very, very, very late in the day in the round, but the round after that, Paddy Donovan took centre of the ring again. Would Harlem Eubank be able to do that? Absolutely not. So, I don't think there's levels above them. I just think the power is what makes the big difference in that fight.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, not to sound too harsh, or to have too much of an Irish bias, but I do think Paddy Donovan done enough to win the fight. As you say, though, credit to Crocker. He did prove a lot of people wrong coming in, altering the game plan. But I don't think, I think he is, well, I wouldn't say weakest of the world champions when Mario Barrios is still holding a world title at 147, but I wouldn't favour him against the kind of, the better champion, the Brian Norman Jr. or who have you, names like that. But yeah, it's not levels, but as you say, I think the power should be enough to kind of overwhelm Harlem Eubank. And as you say, I think if he lands that shot that he did on Paddy for the second knockdown, it's hard to see Harlem Eubank recovering from that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's an announcement on that. But just before we wrap up, let's say it's not Harlem Eubank. What are some names that you'd like to see Lewis Crocker in against? You mentioned Liam Parrow now won the Eliminator. Survived a couple of scares in that one against a non-puncher. Is that a fight you'd like to see next, or is there a couple of other names you'd like to kind of throw in there?
I think, I think throw him in if he wants to be a world champion, defend it against someone that is operating at the top end of the division. I had a look through the British rankings just before this video, and bar Jack Catterall, who's obviously ranked number one. You've got obviously he's fighting Echo Esserman, the likes of Pat McCormack, Connor Walker, probably even throw Sam Egginton into the mix. That none of them appeal for a world title level fight. Definitely not yet for Pat McCormack. But I think he probably will eventually get there. I think it's got to be Leon Paro. If Leon Paro against David Papo, however you say it, he had a few hairy moments in there. I didn't watch it live. I was at work. I had to watch it back. When I watched it back, I thought I had Leon Paro would win that quite convincingly, and he didn't for me. He did win the fight, but there was a couple of hairy moments in there for him where it looked like he was in quite a bit of trouble. So he showed again. Leon Paro showed he can get caught. Has Lewis Crocker got more power than David Papot, however you say it? Probably. So again, boxing math and boxing chess doesn't always work out. But if you put Lewis Crocker in some of those situations, a bit more power, you never know what's going to happen. However, will he be able to get those shots off against a top of the division level operator? If he knocks him out, if we're seeing a new Lewis Crocker that can stand and be a bit smarter, a bit clever, pick his shots off, then throw him in with some bigger names, like you say, your Brian Norman Juniors. But it's one step at a time. It's Leon Paro. If he gets through that, it's got to be Jack Catterall. And Billy Nelson's not going to like this, but I think Jack Catterall absolutely spins Lewis Crocker on his head time after time after time in that fight. I think Jack Catterall cruises to a points victory. It'll just be a case of pick your shots, don't get caught, and get through, and stick it on him as much as you can. So Leon Paro, if he gets through that, let's have a big domestic clash. Maybe back in Belfast. at Windsor Park. Who knows? Or over in Manchester. But yeah, for me, Liam Paro, if and a big if he gets through that, it's got to be Jack Carroll.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. As if we need to give Billy Nelson more reason to hate us. He won't like that, but we're used to that at this stage. But yeah, Liam Parrow, I like the Liam Parrow fight. It's one of those that my opinion's probably changed on how that fight goes after watching Liam Parrow against David Papo up at welterweight now. Papo can't punch, well, his record suggests that he can't punch at all. And yeah, he really hurt him on numerous occasions, badly damaged the eye. So yeah, I think if Crocker's landing the shots that David Papo landed, it's going to be an early night. It won't see the final bell, in my opinion. But yeah, I think I'm a fan of Liam Parrow. I think he's a good fighter, and I think yeah, it'll be a good kind of similarity in levels for that one. And then I agree with you again, Jack Catterall, if he has anything left, stylistically all wrong for Lewis Crocker, in my opinion. But yeah, there's interesting options, once it's not an underwhelming IBF, most of the top 15 of the IBF tends to be fairly underwhelming. So yeah, once it's not one of those, I'm kind of happy enough with that. But yeah, that's all we have time for on this one. A fun discussion there, myself and Owen talking about a potential Harlem Eubank Lewis Crocker world title fight that seems to be touted over the past day or so. Eubank, is he a front runner for the fight? Or, will it be a Liam Parrow or Jack Catterall, somebody else? Let us know what you think in the comments. Who would you like to see Lewis Crocker fight in his first defence of the world title? The names we mentioned, another name, let us know. And how does he get on? Drop a comment, get involved, give the video a like. If you're not doing so already, subscribe to our YouTube channel at ESBR Boxing and follow us on all social media. Owen, it was a pleasure. Take care.
Cheers, mate.